The humans arrived on the battlefield, unleashing a ferocious assault on the alien adversaries with an intensity only they could muster. Moments earlier, the Urthak fleet had faced obliteration at the hands of the ruthless Trigon. Proud Urthak ships were torn apart by the relentless barrage of enemy fire. Captain Kale gripped his command console in despair as damage reports poured in. Weapons offline, shields failing, hull breaches on all decks. They were outmatched, outgunned, and out of options. Kale prepared to order a full retreat to salvage the remnants of his shattered fleet. Suddenly, a deep voice crackled over the comm channel. "This is Captain Alex Drayton of the United Earth ship Vanguard. We hear you, Urthak, and help is on the way. Stand by for reinforcements." A massive human dreadnought dropped out of warp, its cannons already firing at the Trigon ships. Perhaps today would not be the end of the Urthak after all, as long as these formidable human allies were here to level the playing field. Emperor Korthak reclined in his command throne, sneering as he watched the Urthak fleet disintegrate under a barrage of plasma torpedoes. This was the moment he had awaited, the chance to seize the Urthak territories. Every credit from the Trigon coffers had gone into the Imperial war machine. Korthak witnessed the fruits of his efforts in the destruction displayed on his view screen. Urthak cruisers exploded into clouds of metal fragments with each hit. Their return fire fizzled out harmlessly against the Trigon defenses, like insects trying to fight a blast furnace. Suddenly, his sensor officer reported, "Your Excellency, a new contact has arrived on the battlefield, bearing unfamiliar markings and an electronic signature." Korthak turned to the main display. A colossal dreadnought, dwarfing his largest ships, had dropped out of warp. Its angular hull bristled with enough guns to arm an entire fleet. "What in the seven hells is that?" Korthak spat. "Hail them immediately." The commander officer stabbed at her console. "This is Captain Alex Drayton of the United Earth ship Vanguard. Attacking the Urthak was a grave mistake, you Trigon scum. Let's see how you fare against an opponent that can hit back." As soon as Drayton finished speaking, the Vanguard unleashed a full alpha strike on the nearest Trigon frigate. Missiles, mass drivers, and beam weapons converged on the target. The frigate's shields failed instantly, and the hull shattered like cheap plastic. Korthak watched in horror as the human ship tore deeper into his lines. Their weapons cut through his prized armada like a force demon's claws through flesh. Trigon shields, products of decades of refinement, couldn't withstand more than one or two hits. The Emperor leapt from his throne and stormed over to the gunnery crews. "Get it together," Korthak snarled. "I want all forward lances firing on that human monstrosity immediately." As his ships reoriented to face the human vessel, Korthak felt his gut sink like a stone. He realized he had made a grave miscalculation. These humans were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. His empire had finally encountered a foe that could be its equal. Alex Drayton stood on the bridge of the UES Vanguard, his brow furrowed in concentration. The main view screen showed the chaotic swirl of ships locked in bitter combat. "Status report," Drayton barked. His first officer consulted her terminal. "The Trigon fleet is pressing their attack. The Urthak have lost 70% of their ships. They won't last much longer at this rate." Drayton nodded grimly. When Earth had picked up the faint distress call from the embattled Urthak, there had been heated debates at Terran High Command about whether to intervene. Humanity was still new to the galactic stage, and many in the Admiralty were hesitant to involve themselves in an alien war. But Drayton had lobbied hard for intervention. He understood the strategic value of the Urthak, known for their industriousness and extensive network of colonies and mining outposts in this region of space. Plus, they shared a border with Earth's fledgling colony in the Oort Cloud. If the expansionist Trigon Empire wiped them out and claimed their territory, it would put Earth's holdings at risk. So Drayton had emphasized the threat of Trigon aggression and the importance of protecting a species unable to defend themselves. His arguments had won the day, and the Vanguard was dispatched at flank speed to the Urthak home system just as the Trigons commenced their assault. Now, seeing the Trigon fleet breaking apart under his guns, Drayton allowed himself a quick fist pump. The decision to send the UES Vanguard had been the right call. It was the most advanced ship in Earth's space forces, a sleek, deadly dreadnought that outclassed anything else on the battlefield. The Vanguard's triple-armored hull shrugged off the few laser blasts that connected. Its own weaponry, banks of quantum phase cannons and neutron torpedoes, tore through Trigon shields like they were made of paper. The Trigons had clearly never encountered human weapons before and had nothing to counter them. "Captain, the Trigon flagship is changing course, heading straight for us," the sensor officer reported. Drayton leaned forward in his command chair. It seemed the Trigon commander had finally realized the humans posed the real threat. He was going to try to take the Vanguard out of the fight. "Helm, come about to face them, but keep us moving." "Don't let them draw a bead on us," Drayton ordered. Maneuvering jets fired, and the mighty dreadnought swung its prow toward the oncoming Trigon warship, even as its guns continued to hammer the enemy fleet. "Sarah, I need the neutron cannons prepped for a full volley. Divert power from the aft shield array if you have to. When that bastard gets in range, I want to put him down hard." The bridge became tense as the Trigon flagship bore down on them. It was ugly, with a spiked prow and a bulbous aft section that glowed a baleful red. Almost twice the size of the Vanguard, it began to belch bright yellow energy bolts the instant it entered extreme range. The human shields flared, but held under the onslaught. A low rising hum started to build from somewhere deep within the Vanguard. The neutron cannons were coming online, capacitors greedily sucking up every spare watt of reactor output to charge their magnetic accelerator coils. Drayton watched the holographic range indicator, mentally urging the Trigon ship to close the distance faster. His fingers tightened on his armrests as the icon edged into optimal firing position. Almost there. "Fire!" Drayton roared. Brilliant blue-white beam erupted from the Vanguard's forward gun ports. It struck the Trigon flagship head-on. The alien ship's shields flashed, struggling to repel the neutron stream for a single second before failing spectacularly. The beam punched clean through the center of the massive vessel, vaporizing armor, deck, and crew alike. It exited the far side in a spray of molten metal. For a moment, the two halves of the dissected warship hung motionless in space. Then a series of internal explosions ripped them apart, scattering debris across the void. Cheers erupted on the Vanguard's bridge as the Trigon flagship disintegrated, but Drayton quelled any premature celebration with a sharp hand gesture. They may have just cut the head off the snake, but the rest of the Trigon fleet was still out there, and Earth had no reinforcements in range. He punched the fleet comm channel. "This is Captain Drayton to all Urthak ships. Form up on the Vanguard. Maintain a defensive sphere formation. Damaged Urthak cruisers and frigates, trailing atmosphere from breached hulls, maneuvered to cluster tightly around the human dreadnought." Together, they presented a concentrated defensive posture, allowing the Urthak ships to shelter behind the Vanguard's shields, while adding their remaining firepower to its own. Tactical, coordinate firing solutions with the Urthak. We need to whittle down the Trigon numbers and get them to break off. Relay targeting data and optimal attack vectors, Drayton ordered. The bridge became tense as the Trigon fleet regrouped for another pass. Stung, but not beaten, even with their flagship destroyed. The Trigons still badly outnumbered the ragged, human Urthak defensive formation. It was going to be a slugging match, trading casualties until one side had enough and disengaged. And when it came to bloody, protracted space battles, there was no one in the galaxy more suited to it than humans. They would make the Trigon pay in blood for every inch of space. The Vanguard would lead the way. Cale gripped the armrests of his command chair as another volley of plasma torpedoes rocked his battered cruiser. Smoke poured from ruptured conduits, and the lights flickered ominously. He coughed, trying to peer through the haze at his view screen. It showed nothing but the twisted wreckage of Earthak ships, once proud vessels reduced to drifting hulks by the relentless Trigon onslaught. This was the end, Cale thought grimly. The Earthak had fought valiantly, but they were simply outmatched. The Trigons had come with a massive fleet, armed with weapons that cut through Earthak shields like a hot knife through butter. Cale had watched his comrades fall one by one, their ships blossoming into brief blazing stars before being snuffed out forever. Now it seemed he would be joining them soon. His weapons were depleted, his engines failing. All he could do was stare death in the face and await the final blow. Suddenly, his sensor officer shouted over the din of groaning metal and venting atmosphere. "Sir, new contact dropping out of warp. It's massive." Cale snapped his head around to look, expecting to see yet another Trigon monstrosity coming to finish them off. But instead, he saw a ship unlike any he had ever encountered. It was sleek and predatory, all sharp angles and bristling gun batteries. And it was huge, dwarfing even the largest Trigon battleships. As Cale watched in awe, the newcomer opened fire, its weapons striking out with searing beams of light that pierced Trigon hulls like paper. Mighty warships, ones that had shrugged off the best the Earthak had to throw at them, crumpled and burst under the onslaught. It was like watching a child smashing toy ships. "Incoming transmission from the unknown vessel," his comm officer reported, her voice shaking. Cale nodded numbly for her to put it through. A human face filled the screen, a male with sharp features and eyes that seemed to blaze with an inner fire. "This is Captain Alex Drayton of the United Earth ship Vanguard," the human said, his voice calm and confident. "We stand with the Earthak against Trigon aggression. All ships form up on us. We'll take the lead." Cale felt his jaw drop. The humans, he had heard stories about them, of course. Everyone had. A young race, newly arrived on the galactic stage but technologically advanced, with ships and weapons beyond anything the Earthak possessed. He had always dismissed those stories as exaggerations, tall tales born of too much Alterian whiskey. Surely no upstart species could be that powerful, that fearless. But now, seeing the human ship, the Vanguard, in action, Cale realized how wrong he had been. It moved through the battle like a graceful dancer, slipping between lumbering Trigon ships striking with lightning precision, its weapons carved through the enemy fleet like a scythe through wheat, leaving nothing but drifting debris in its wake. And the crew, Cale watched them through the comlink, marveling at their focus and professionalism. They moved with a calm assurance that spoke of extensive training and combat experience. No panic, no hesitation, just a steely determination to get the job done. Shaking himself from his stupor, Cale barked orders to his helmsman. "Take us in tight formation with the Vanguard, match their maneuvers, and add our firepower to theirs." The Earthak cruiser surged forward, taking its place in the perimeter the humans were establishing. Other Earthak ships followed suit, the ragged remnants of their once proud fleet rallying around this unexpected savior. Cale watched in astonishment as Captain Drayton coordinated the motley assortment of ships, human and Earthak alike. The captain's orders were crisp and precise, his tactics unlike anything Cale had seen before. He used the Vanguard as a shield, blocking the heaviest Trigon fire while the Earthak ships darted out to harass the enemy flanks. It was a masterful display of fleet combat, and it was working. Slowly but surely, the tide of battle was turning. The Trigon advance faltered, then stalled as they suddenly found themselves facing a united front of human and Earthak ships. For the first time since the first Trigon torpedo had struck home, Cale allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, with these humans at their side, they could do more than just survive this day. Maybe they could win. He glanced at the comm screen again, at the face of Captain Alex Drayton, calm and resolute amid the chaos of battle. Cale still couldn't quite believe it, but he silently thanked the gods, the ancestors, and whoever else might be listening for the day the humans came to fight alongside the Urthak. He gripped his armrests tighter and turned his attention back to the battle, ready to fight with renewed determination. The Trigon had started this war, but with the humans' help, the Urthak would finish it. Emperor Korthak stormed back and forth across the bridge of his flagship, the Trigon Fist of Conquest. His clawed feet dug furrows into the metal decking with each angry step. He could feel the rage boiling in his gut, threatening to erupt at any moment. This invasion had been his magnum opus, the culmination of years of careful planning and preparation. The Urthak were supposed to crumble before the might of his armada, their worlds and resources ripe for the taking. It was all going to be so perfect until the damned humans showed up. Korthak snarled as he watched another of his battleships consumed in the brilliant flash of a nuclear detonation. The twisted, burning wreckage spun lazily through the void before his view screen. Everywhere he looked, it was the same story. His once proud fleet, the most powerful ever assembled by the Trigon Empire, was being dismantled ship by ship. And it was all because of that lone human dreadnought. Shields down to 12%, weapons offline, catastrophic damage to decks 7 through 12. Emperor, we must withdraw, one of Korthak's tactical officers pleaded from his console. Korthak rounded on the officer, murder in his slitted eyes. Withdraw? Flee from these apes who only learned to walk upright yesterday? The officer quailed under the Emperor's glare but pressed on. Your Excellency, our forces are being slaughtered. If we do not retreat and regroup, the entire fleet will be lost. For a moment, Korthak's hand drifted toward the blaster at his hip. It would be so simple to put this coward out of his misery. But no, he needed every claw at their station if they were going to turn this battle around. And turn it around, they would. Korthak was the Emperor of the Trigons, the master of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever seen. He had not clawed his way to the top of the food chain to run scared at the first sign of resistance. Bring us about, Korthak barked at the helmsman. Set course for that human ship. Divert all power to engines and forward shields. The bridge crew looked at him like he had sprouted a second head, but none dared question his orders. Slowly, ponderously, the Fist of Conquest swung its prow toward the UES Vanguard. Its thrusters flared white-hot as they propelled the massive warship into the teeth of the human guns. Sire, we're being hailed by the human ship, the comms officer reported, her voice quavering. Ignore them, Korthak snapped. I have no interest in trading quips with mammals. He leaned forward in his command throne, his claws digging into the armrests. On the view screen, the Vanguard grew larger and larger, its sleek, predatory lines a stark contrast to the bulky, utilitarian shapes of the Trigon ships. Korthak felt his heart pounding in his chest as the distance closed. This was it, the moment of truth. He would show these upstarts the folly of challenging the Trigon Empire. He would crush them, grind them to dust beneath his heel, even if it cost him his last ship and his last breath. Target their bridge, Korthak growled. I want to look that human captain in the eye as we send him to oblivion. The gunnery crews rushed to comply, swinging the Fist of Conquest's few remaining operable turrets to bear on the Vanguard's command tower. The human ship's shields shimmered and crackled as they absorbed a hail of laser fire, but the Vanguard was not content to remain on the defensive. Its own gun spoke, a long burst of blinding light that speared the Trigon flagship amidships. Korthak was thrown from his throne as the entire ship shuddered and lurched. Warning klaxons blared, and the acrid stench of burning insulation filled the air. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5, someone shouted over the cacophony. We're venting atmosphere. Korthak dragged himself upright, bracing against his command console. Through the haze of smoke and sparks, he could see the Vanguard turning, bringing its broadside to bear. This was it, the end. But he would not close his eyes. He would not look away. He was Korthak, emperor of the Trigons, and he would face his death with the same iron will that had carried him through 100 conquests. "For the Empire!" he roared, his voice rising above the chaos. The vanguard fired a full salvo from its main batteries, just as another explosion rocked the fist of Conquest's stern. Korthak felt the deck buckle beneath his feet. He saw the bridge crew flung like rag dolls, consoles detonating in showers of sparks and shrapnel, and then everything disappeared in a blinding white light as the world dissolved into fire.